Ladies and gentlemen, good evening from Damascus Radio, the broadcasting service of the Syrian Arab Republic. You're still listening to Damascus Radio. Now stay tuned for the news. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Our armed forces continued to clear a number of the Aleppo neighborhoods from the armed terrorist groups who had tried to wreak havoc and inflict damage upon the area. They eliminated a number of terrorists who were trying to enter into the Aleppo area from al-Nadin area, and they halted their attacks, killing 4 terrorists and injuring many others in the Saif ad-Dawla area and the Salah ad-Din neighborhood. The army units also intercepted terrorist groups coming in from the Saadallah area or Saadallah Jabri area, and they killed a large number of them. Our armed forces also targeted the terrorists that were gathering near the western establishment, and they tried to infiltrate from the Bustan area into Aleppo. The army units then clashed with armed terrorist groups in al-Rabia area and al-Sukkariya neighborhood, killing a large number of the mercenaries and the terrorists. The security forces seized weapons and ammunition in 2 terrorist hideouts in Saif ad-Dawla and the Suq al-Hal areas in Aleppo, including rocket-propelled grenade launchers and PKC machine guns and ammunition. An official source said that the weapons confiscated included Russian-made rifles, bombs, and rifles, in addition to rocket-propelled grenade launchers, PKC machine guns, and a large quantity of ammunition, armors, and military uniforms. Over to you, Basim.
Thank you, Khalid. Our armed forces targeted an armed terrorist group that was trying to install a mortar gun between Al-Kabir and the Saghir squares in Taldo village in Homs suburbs in order to assault citizens. The army scored direct hits among the members of the terrorist groups and destroyed the gun. Our army units have finished clearing Yelda in Damascus suburbs from the armed terrorists and are chasing fleeing gunmen in Al-Hajira village. The army units had dismantled and detonated 10 explosive devices and mortar shells planted by terrorists around Al-Shafi'i Mosque and Martyr Ismail Akari School and the residential buildings in Yelda in Damascus suburbs. An official source said each explosive device weighed between 25 and 50 kilograms. The source added that a number of armed men were detained during the operation. Back to you, Khalid.
Thank you, Basim. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has warned that the interference in the crisis in Syria to support one side against the other is unacceptable. During a ministerial meeting at the organization of the International Conference on Building the Measures in Asia, Lavrov said that the crisis in Syria has become one of the most pressing international issues. Lavrov pointed out that the foreign players should call on the Syrian sides to end the violence immediately and to guarantee the circumstances for all Syrians to sit at the table for dialogue and away from foreign intervention. Lavrov reiterated Syria's strong support for the efforts exerted by the United Nations envoy to Syria, al-Akhdar al-Ibrahimi. He pointed out that the Security Council has refused to condemn the terrorist explosions in Aleppo, and this is regrettable, recalling that the Security Council has been responding to all the terrorist operations without explanation by declaring its strong condemnation of the terrorists regardless of the causes that stand behind it. However, the West has abandoned such stands for the first time after the terrorist operation in Damascus, which targeted the National Security Building and claimed the lives of the senior security officials. A similar view was expressed by the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Gennady Gatilov, who affirmed that the West adopts a double-standard policy by refusing to condemn the terrorist acts in Syria. On his page on Twitter, Gatilov pointed out that the Western countries have blocked a resolution at the United Nations Security Council which condemns the terrorist operations in Syria, adding that there should be a contact between all sides on whatever items of combating terrorism and the international community. Back to you, Basim.
Thank you, Khalid. On his part, Iranian Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi, that the countries which are keen to restore security to Syria must pave the way for dialogue between the government and the opposition. Salehi pointed out during the ministerial meeting, affirmed that those countries should also work to stop violence in the country, calling for putting legal and international documents which prevent attacks on nuclear facilities operating to produce peaceful nuclear energy. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez affirmed that the Syrian people are victim to a violent colonial policy, asserting that he will assess the Iranian proposal on the inclusion of Venezuela in the contact group to solve the crisis in Syria. Iran proposed that Venezuela, a member of the non-aligned movement, join the coming meetings of the contact group on Syria, which encompasses Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, in addition to Iran.
The Mufti of the Republic, Dr. Ahmad Badruddin Hassoun, has affirmed that the dialogue is the only way to solve the crisis in Syria. During an interview with the Russia Today television channel, Hassoun stressed that the Syrian people, land, and the government are targeted today, calling on those who carry weapons to abandon their arms and to get involved in a sincere and responsible dialogue that will lead to a solution that satisfies all the Syrians. The Mufti also voiced appreciation for the Russian stand in support of the Syrian people and in support of Syria. The Libyan Interior Ministry announced that the U.S. ambassador to Libya and 5 other embassy staff were killed in a rocket attack in the Libyan city of Benghazi. It is to be noted that hundreds of protesters have targeted the U.S. regarding the U.S. movie that allegedly insulted the Prophet Muhammad, and they broke into the U.S. consulate building in Benghazi and they set it ablaze. Back to you, Basim.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Egyptian demonstrators yesterday brought down the American flag off the American embassy in Cairo to protest against a film currently on display in the USA that is abusive of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The demonstrators shouted anti-U.S. slogans denouncing the film and its producers and calling for stopping the film, referring its staff to trial and presenting an official apology to Muslims. And now over to the final item, ladies and gentlemen, in our bulletin, which says Prime Minister Wa'il Halqi approved the proposal presented by the Economic Committee concerning the demand of the Ministry of Communication to execute contract number 4 for the year 2011 for the operation of the e-government portal system, which provides for several issues, including the re-announcement of the e-government portal project and putting preferential terms in case a loan was offered to implement the project, as well as maintaining communications with the embassies of friendly countries in this regard, in addition to developing a study on alternatives to finance the project, including partnership with the private sector in case suitable loans were not provided.
With this, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our news bulletin for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Following this bulletin, you'll be listening to News and Views and the Press Review, and then later you'll be listening to Palestine Forever in Mind. Thank you.
Damascus Radio presents News and Views.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Manipulating the Syrian crisis or talking about political solutions is no more a mystery, as the issue is evidently clear and can be summed up with two main demands. The first is to end the flow of weapons and money to the armed men inside Syria from the regional states, and the second calls on the opposition to get into a national political dialogue, which may result in finding a political solution for the crisis in Syria, provided that this solution be approved by the Syrian people through a just and clear democratic mechanism. Making use of the humanitarian dimension of the crisis in Syria is also evident following the failure of the conspiracy of the conspiring states on Syria to achieve their goals through different ways to undermine it, as these states seek to push the situation towards buffer and no-fly zones. This new kind of colonization will certainly fail as the former ones did. Since the beginning of the crisis in Syria, the Syrian government has welcomed any regional or international effort that might take part in solving the crisis. It has also facilitated the work of the regional and international envoys, but it was fully clear that the Western will and some regional tools prevent finding a political solution, pushing towards militarization and more violence and bloodshedding to bring in the foreign intervention. This means that there is no hope of changing the line of the crisis if those states do not change remarkably their stances. The six-point plan of the former UN envoy Kofi Annan and the Geneva Declaration represent, from the Syrian leadership point of view, a good and suitable base for finding the necessary solution, provided that it would not be misinterpreted by some colonial sides. Syria is with a national political solution for solving the crisis. This political solution should be through a serious dialogue where all parts of the Syrian society, including the opposition, take part. It should also be built on the base of rejecting the foreign intervention and preserving the Syrian sovereignty.
That was news and views from Damascus Radio. Damascus Radio presents Syrian Local Press Review.
Major prominence in Damascus newspapers has been accorded to the following news items. Russia condemns the terrorist explosions and holds the West responsible for the non-implementation of the Geneva Agreement. Iran asserts that the solution to the Syrian crisis is in stopping the armament and the funding of the terrorist groups. Severe blows have been dealt to the terrorists. 26 vehicles equipped with Doshka machine guns are destroyed in Aleppo suburbs. Storming-ins are carried out in Damascus suburbs and Homs. The Arab Journalists Federation affirms the decision to suspend the transmission of Syrian satellite channels contravenes an inalienable human right. Egyptian demonstrators bring down the American flag of the American embassy in Cairo. The government has denounced the terrorist explosion in Al-Mal'ab neighborhood in Aleppo and praised the achievements of our armed forces. The cabinet decides to distribute 200 liters of diesel to each family as an initial stage and pledges to provide rehabilitation services to the areas cleared of terrorists. During his meeting with Mufti Hassoun and Patriarch Khoury, Omakhanov says the Russian people, with all their categories, stand by Syria's side. A statement by the Ministry of Information on the 11th of September anniversary affirms Syria's call to confront terrorism and bring to account its supporters and emphasizes that combating terrorism is a sovereign right and duty. Egyptian politicians and news media men tell Al-Thawra that is organized terrorism for which its supporters and funders are to blame. An officer is killed and 7 others wounded in a blast before a police center in Istanbul. The editorial in Al-Thawra refers to the UN envoy to Syria, al-Akhdar Ibrahimi's statement that his mission is difficult and what made him accept it is his feeling towards the Syrians. Al-Ibrahimi knows more than what he declares, the paper says. He is right about his speculation regarding the difficulty of his mission, which he considered as close to the impossible. If the mission is difficult and impossible, Al-Thawra adds, it is not because of the Syrians and their stance, but because of those who intervene in Syrian affairs. Many Syrians in the opposition today want dialogue to get out of the crisis and to stop the violence. However, there are others in the opposition, Al-Thawra goes on, who reject dialogue and call for foreign military intervention. When the West abandons the opposition that is ready for dialogue and calling for a peaceful political solution and supports those who call for military intervention, this indicates that what is hidden is much more than what has been said or declared, namely to undermine Syria and accord major priority to Israel's security, the editorial in Al-Thawra asserts. Whoever performs the task of mediation among conflicting parties in a difficult crisis, like the Syrian crisis, must enjoy a strong will, a clarity of vision, and good or at least acceptable relations with all parties. In such case, Russia is the best mediator. The editorial in Al-Thawra concludes, wishing al-Ibrahimi good luck in his mission.
That was a review of the Syrian local press issued in Damascus this morning.
Damascus Radio presents Palestine Forever in Mind. A weekly program prepared to you by Khaled Qais and read by al-Mazzeh. With the company of sound engineer Hussam Khouri. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Palestinian literature and art have been primary avenues of expression of the tragedy and the aspirations of the Palestinian people. Peoples everywhere have always used novels, poems, paintings, music, and sculpture to convey their personal and communal fears and hopes. The unique individual and collective experiences of the Palestinian people during the past few decades were found to be recorded in the intellectual and cultural output of the Palestinian people. The fact that the Palestinian writers and artists were not an elite group privileged with a rare kind of education bearing their souls through their art to each other in writers or artist colonies intensified the tendency to become, as a Palestinian intellectual put it, the spokesman of a nation. Palestinian writers and artists were, and still are for the most part, ordinary people sharing the typical experiences of their community, as one Palestinian artist put it. Among the Palestinian painters one finds the stone cutter and laborer, the gardener, the carpenter, and the blacksmith and the school teacher. Few have had the opportunity to obtain professional training, travel or live in a European capital exposed to be masters. Palestinian writers and artists, therefore, were and are deeply involved in the affairs of the nation, and their art is heavily colored with social concern. Palestine becomes a predominant theme of Palestinian literature and art. This commitment often was deliberately and conscious resolve evidence in the Charter of the Association of Palestinian Cinema, founded in 1972. The Charter noted that it was important to develop a Palestinian cinema capable of supporting with dignity the struggle of our people, revealing the actual facts of our situation and describing the stages of our Arab and Palestinian struggle to liberate our homeland. The Palestinian has never felt a need to be defensed about the social mission of his art and literature. His strong urge to shout and to the word his tragedy experience drove him to seek every conceivable mode of expression, as the mayor of Nazareth, who is himself a poet, put it, to engrave the wide range of experiences in national oppression, even on the bark of an olive tree in the countryside. Their strong desire to reach the people often led to the impairment of the quality of Palestinian literature and art. The young, talented Palestinian was overwhelmed by the destitution of his own people, the necessity of self-expression, not the impulse for aesthetic creation, encouraged his art. This need to record and immortalize the Palestinian case and to speak on behalf of the people's refusal to be defeated or spoken or broken become both the strength and weakness of the Palestinian culture output. The themes which permit Palestinian literature and art portray the profoundest acceptable or aspect of the Palestinian experience, the assertion of a suppressed and dented identity, and the strong yearning of a usurped native soil. Sometimes such themes are expressed explicitly in one of the most popular poems, Identity Card. Mahmoud Darwish expresses defiance of Israeli categorization of the Arab as a non-Jews. Write down, I am an Arab. 5,000 is my number. 8 children, the 9th will come next summer. Angry, write down, I am an Arab. Hamush Rashid tells the world that he is not merely a non-Jew, not even just an Arab refugee, but a Palestinian. Palestinian is my name in a clear script. Only all battlefields I have inscribed my name, eclipsing all other titles. That's all for tonight. Please stay tuned for the next week. Best wishes from sound engineer Hassan Makhouri.
You're listening to Damascus Radio, the broadcasting service of the Syrian Arab Republic. Before we sound off the national anthem, here is a final look at the news summary.
Our armed forces continue to clear a number of the Aleppo neighborhood terrorist groups, and these armed terrorist groups have wreaked havoc. The armed forces inflicted upon them heavy losses. Also, the armed forces attack a number of terrorists in the villages surrounding the city of Homs. The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, has warned of interference in the crisis in Syria and supporting one side on the expense of the other, as this is something that is unacceptable. The Venezuelan President, Hugo Chavez, affirms that the Syrian people are the victims of the violence of the colonialism policies. The Libyan Interior Ministry announced that the U.S. ambassador to Libya and 5 other embassy staff workers have been killed in a rocket attack that was launched in the city of Benghazi. And in Egypt, the demonstrators brought down the American flag from the American embassy in Cairo in protest against the film that was produced in the United States and that was offensive to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our transmission for tonight. Until meet again tomorrow at the same time and on the same frequencies, we wish you all the best from Damascus Radio, the broadcasting service of the Syrian Arab Republic.